Rumplestiltskin by the Brothers Grimm. There was once a miller who had a daughter that he was very proud of. Indeed, she was a lovely girl, lovely long fair hair, lovely blue eyes. But the miller was always boasting how clever his daughter was. He would boast that his daughter could make cakes better than the baker in the village. When he saw paintings in the town, he would boast that his daughter could paint better than the artists. He was passing by a church and he heard somebody playing the piano inside, and he would boast that his daughter could play the piano much better. One day, the king of the country was driving by in his carriage, and he stopped at the village to meet the people there, and he heard the miller, as usual, boasting about his daughter. And the king said to the miller, "I hear you have a very clever daughter." And the miller bowed low and said, "Your Majesty, there's nothing my daughter cannot do. My daughter," he said, trying to impress the king, "can even spin straw into gold." "Is this true?" said the king. "I've never heard of that before." "It is true, Your Majesty," said the miller. "In that case," said the king, "I'll take her with me to my palace, and she can spin straw into gold for me." Well, the daughter was put into the carriage with the king and taken to the palace, where she was treated very well. But that evening, the king put the daughter into a room with piles and piles of straw and a spinning wheel, and said to her, "If you can spin all this straw into gold for me by the morning, I will give you many presents. If you don't, I shall cut off your head." With that, he shut the door and locked the door, and the poor girl wept bitterly, because of course she didn't know how to spin straw into gold. While she was weeping bitterly, a funny little man suddenly appeared in the room and said to her, "Why are you weeping, fair maiden? What's the matter?" And the girl said, "The king has locked me in this room with all this straw, which he wants me to spin into gold by the morning, or he'll cut off my head." And the little man said to the girl, "Well, what can you give me if I do it for you?" And the girl said, "I have a ring on my finger." "Yes," said the little man, "I can take that. Now you go to sleep and leave it with me." The girl drifted off to sleep, and she could hear the whirring of the spinning wheel. When she woke up in the morning, do you know, all the straw had been spun into the finest gold. And the little man said to the girl, "Your ring, please." "Yes," said the girl, and gave the little man the ring, and he disappeared. And just as he disappeared, the door opened and the king came in, and he was delighted with all the gold. That he gave the girl many presents, and she was guest of honour at his banqueting table. However, I'm afraid the king was greedy, and a few nights later he locked her into another room with piles and piles and piles of straw and the spinning wheel, and said to the girl, "If you can spin all this straw into gold for me by the morning, you will get more presents. If you don't, I shall cut off your head." And he shut the door and locked the door, and the poor girl broke down and wept bitterly. While she was bitterly weeping, this funny little man suddenly appeared again and said, "Why are you weeping, maiden? What's the matter this time?" And the girl said, "Once more the king has locked me in this room with all this straw that he wants me to spin into gold by the morning, or he'll cut off my head." And the little man said to the girl, "What will you give me if I do it for you?" "My necklace," said the girl. And the funny little man looked at the necklace and said, "Yes, it's a lovely necklace. Yes, I can take that. Now you go to sleep and leave it all with me." And the girl drifted off to sleep, and she could hear the whirring of the spinning wheel. When she woke up in the morning, once again, all the straw had been spun into the finest gold. And the little man said, "Necklace, please." "Yes," said the girl, unhooked the necklace and gave it to the little man, and he disappeared. Just as he disappeared, the door opened and in came the king, and he was delighted with all the gold, and he gave the girl many, many presents. And she was driving around with him in the carriage, waving to the people, and she was indeed living a very good life. However, I'm afraid the king was getting more greedy, and a few nights later he locked her into another room with piles and piles and piles and piles of straw and the spinning wheel, and said to the girl, "If you can spin all this straw into gold for me by the morning, I'll make you my queen. If you don't, I shall cut off your head." With that, he shut the door, locked the door, and went away. and the girl sat and wept bitterly. While she was weeping bitterly, the funny little man appeared once more, and he said to her, "Fair maiden, why are you weeping? What's the matter this time?" And the girl said, "Once more the king has locked me into this room with all this straw, and he wants me to spin into gold, or it will cut off my head." And the little man said, "Well, what will you give me if I do it for you?" And the girl said, "I've nothing more to give you." The little man said to her, "If all this straw is spun into gold by the morning, you'll be queen." "Yes," said the girl. And the little man said, "If I spin all this straw into gold for you, will you give me your first baby?" "Yes," said the girl. "Will you go to sleep," said the little man, "and leave it all with me?" The girl drifted off to sleep, and she could hear the whirring of the spinning wheel. In the morning, it was all spun into the finest gold, and the little man disappeared. And as he disappeared, the door opened, and in came the king, and he was so delighted with all the gold that he and the girl were married, and she was indeed his queen. However, a year later, she was having her first baby. As soon as the baby was born, the little man appeared and said, "I have come to take the baby." And the queen was heartbroken. She bitterly wept and held the baby and said to the little man, "Please don't take my baby. Please let me keep my baby. Please, you can have all the presents you want, but please, please let me keep my baby." Well, the little man, he said to the queen, "I'll give you a chance. If you can guess my name, you can keep your baby." He then said to her, "I will come back for 3 evenings and give you 3 guesses. If you can guess my name, then you can keep your child." With that, he disappeared. The next day, all the courtiers and all the servants were trying to think of what the little man's name could be. What sort of a name could a funny little man like that have? That evening, he appeared and said to the queen, "Can you guess my name?" And the queen sat and thought and said, "Is it Jasper?" "No," said the little man. "Is it Caspar?" "No," said the little man. "Is it Bartholomew?" "No," said the little man, and he disappeared. The next day, all the courtiers and all the servants were trying to think of what sort of a name a funny little man like that could have. And one of them said, "Perhaps it's just an ordinary plain name." That evening, the little man appeared again before the queen and said, "Can you guess my name?" And the queen said, "Is it George?" "No," said the little man. "Is it Henry?" "No," said the little man. "Is it Peter?" "No," said the little man. He disappeared. The next day was the queen's last chance, and all day all the servants were trying to think of a name for that funny little man. And then one of the servants came running in and said to the queen, "Your Majesty, Your Majesty, while I was riding last night by the edge of the forest, I saw this funny little man, and he was dancing round a fire, and he was saying to himself, 'Today I brew, tomorrow I bake, next day the queen's child I'll take. How glad I am that she'll never know that Rumplestiltskin is my name.'" And the queen said, "Yes, that must be his name, that must be his name." That evening, the little man appeared and said to the queen, "Can you guess my name?" And the queen first of all pretended to be frightened and said, "Is it Bandy Legs?" "No, no, no," said the little man. "Is it Funny Face?" "No, no, no," said the little man, rubbing his hands with glee. And the queen said, Can it be Rumplestiltskin?" And the little man flew into a rage. "You guessed my name, you guessed my name, a witch must have told you." And he stamped his foot so hard he made a big hole in the floor, and he fell right through the hole, and he was never seen again. Well, the queen and the king and the baby lived happily ever after.